Hello, fantasy friends. I'm the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart from HotRoster today, and glory is up for grabs this week as most league championships are on the line in Week 16. But beyond your league title, owners are playing for bragging rights and pride. No one wants to close out the season on a losing note because not only would it cost you a ship, but maybe some valuable prize monies. So to help out close out the season strong, I'm going to give you some advice on which running backs to start and sit in Week 16. One under-the-radar running back this season is Cam Stewart of the Carolina Panthers. After starting the year with injury troubles, Stu has settled into his role in Carolina. Over his last 4 games, Stewart has recorded 51 fantasy points, the 9th highest total for any back down that stretch. His play culminated in a great performance this past Monday night when he was easily the best Panther on the field, running the ball 25 times for 132 yards. That type of production should be on the menu again when Carolina is at home to Atlanta this weekend. The Falcons bleed fantasy points to running backs, allowing 20 on average to opposing RBs this season. They've also given up 6 total scores to backs over the last 5 weeks. A guy like Stewart shouldn't have any issues carving up this D. Start Stu if you got him and pick him up on HotRoster. Another player who's coming out of his shell this season is Bilal Powell of the New York Jets. Since Matt Forte went down, Powell has made the most of his opportunity. First, he roasted the Niners for 179 total yards with 2 TDs in Week 14. Then he followed that up with 27 touches for 162 yards combined against the Fish. Powell certainly deserves a bigger role than simply being a pass-catching back in that Jets offense. But if there ever was a week when that skill set would come in handy, it's this one. The Jets prepare to face off against the New England Patriots in Foxborough. The Pats have been tough against the run, only allowing 3.6 yards per carry, but they also give up nearly 7 receptions to running backs per game. The Jets could be trailing for most of this contest, so don't be surprised if they start chucking the football around and dumping it down to Powell often. Start this guy if you have him, and don't be afraid to pick him up on HotRoster. I know this might sound a little bit crazy considering the year this guy has had, but you have to start Todd Gurley of the Rams this week. You might still hold a grudge against this guy, trust me I do, when I drafted him in my top 5 picks, but this week, Gurley's matchup is too good to be true as he's set to face the Niners in LA. There are only 2 teams this year that have failed to total 100 yards from scrimmage against San Francisco, and one of them happens to be the Rams way back in Week 1. Since that time, the Niners have become the league's worst rush defense. They allow the most rushing yards per game, coinciding with the most yards per carry, and allow a league-high 28 points per game to opposing running backs. Brutal. Plus, they've also given up 9 touchdowns to running backs in the past 4 weeks. That's why you need to roll them if you have them. I guarantee you won't regret it. Put Todd Gurley in your lineup this week. Speaking of fantasy busts, I don't think a player provided more disappointment than the Vikings' Adrian Peterson did when he returned to the lineup in Week 15 after missing 11 games with a torn meniscus. Peterson, he totaled 23 yards on 7 touches, lost a fumble, and scored a whopping 0.3 fantasy points. This week, I don't think things are going to be that bad when the Vikes hit the road to Lambeau Field to play Green Bay. But I do believe Peterson is in line for another dud performance against a red-hot Packers team. Green Bay has only given up 1 score to running backs over their last 4 games and allowed just 14 fantasy points on average to opposing backs in that span. I just don't think this is AP's week to bounce back. You need to sit this guy and bet against him on HotRoster. Don't look now, but the defending NFC champions have a bounce back in their step. The Carolina Panthers have started to string together some wins, and more importantly, they're beginning to tighten up defensively. But one constant for their season has been their ability to stop the run, which is bad news for Devontae Freeman of the Falcons. He's coming off the game of his life where he totaled 155 yards and 3 scores to produce a 31-point fantasy day. But expectations should be tempered this week. First, that career performance came against those San Francisco 49ers, the year's biggest sieve. Secondly, the Panthers couldn't be more opposite to San Francisco's rush D. Since Week 5, they've allowed 4 scores to running backs and have prevented all but 1 back from topping 100 yards rushing this season. I just don't see the running lanes being there for Freeman this week. Bench him if you can afford to, and definitely pick against him on HotRoster. Finally, I'm capping off my sits with another player who most likely won you your matchup in Week 15. Ryan Matthews of the Eagles had himself a day this past Sunday. Against a tough Ravens defense in front of him, Matthews recorded 128 yards on the ground, plus a TD, all on the road in Baltimore. My concern for Matthews this week is the return of Darren Sproles. In Baltimore, Matthews was the bell cow with Sproles out with a concussion. But this week won't be the same for Matthews when the Eagles are at home to the New York Football Giants. Fact is, the Eagles just don't seem to trust Matthews. Hell, this past weekend, Byron Marshall had more snaps. But this is the usual for Matthews. If you look back to games both Matthews and Sproles have played together since week 5, Sproles actually has twice the amount of snaps. So this week, I just don't think the opportunities are going to be there for Matthews. Add to the fact the Giants haven't given up a rushing touchdown in 4 weeks and have on average allowed 10 fantasy points to running backs per game, and you just can't trust Matthews. You got to sit him if you want to win your championship, and make sure you pick against him on HotRoster. Well, that's it for today, my fantasy football friends. Make sure you tune in tomorrow when we check out the best options at wide receiver for Week 16. And for those of you who don't know what HotRoster is, you got to check it out. Go to HotRoster.com, download the app, give it a try. It's like no other fantasy game you've played. And then for help winning the game, check out HotRoster today with me and Gary and Thorne every weekday at 4:30 Eastern, only on the Fantasy Sports Network. For HotRoster now, I'm Cam Stewart, and I'll see you on the virtual gridiron.